My name is Sophie, I'm 67, and I used to think my life would end quietly among my roses. Instead, it started again at my son's funeral with a note that smelled faintly of lily pollen and cheap perfume. You think everything will belong to you. Turn around. Your grandchildren are behind you and they will take everything from you. That was it. No signature, no explanation. Just that neat, mean little threat on cream stationery, tucked under the edge of the hymn book. I was pretending to read. For a solid 30 seconds, I thought it was some horrible joke. People misplace cards at funerals, right? Maybe someone's demented aunt had written this for a soap opera audition. But then the choir started singing Nearer, My God, to Thee, and I did what the note told me. I turned around. Two faces stared back at me from the second row. A boy and a girl, or rather, a man and a woman in their early 20s, but with that same angular jawline I'd powdered on my son since he was 13. The girl's eyes were Michael's, sea blue, sharp, assessing. The boy had my son's smirk, that little crooked tilt on the left that used to make teenage girls fall apart in our kitchen. They weren't crying. Everyone else in that chapel had red eyes, damp tissues, blotchy noses. These two looked annoyed, impatient, like the funeral was holding up their dinner reservation. The girl saw the note in my hand and lifted one perfectly drawn eyebrow, as if to say, finally. And right there, in the front pew beside the closed casket of my only child, the boy I'd raised mostly alone, the man who'd built a multi-million-dollar drone company from our old garage, I felt something crack. Not just grief, not just loss. A very old, very sharp part of me woke up and said, absolutely not. The day the sky fell, 3 weeks earlier, my biggest problem had been aphids. I was in the garden at 7 a.m., as usual, in my faded blue robe and rubber clogs, muttering at the roses. Those bushes had seen everything: my divorce, my son's first broken arm, my hot flashes, my cooling marriage, my husband's exit, my son's wild, shining ascent. The sky was bright and ugly, that kind of hard Texas blue that tells you it'll be 95 before lunch. Austin was already humming beyond the fence leaf blowers. Cars, some kid's bass turned up to loud. My phone rang on the patio table. I ignored it. Aphids first, whoever needed me second. At 67, you earn the right to prioritize. It rang again, and again. By the third time, I sighed, pulled off my gloves, and glanced at the screen. Unknown caller, FAA investigations. I almost didn't answer. I thought it was a scam. You know, your social security number has been compromised. Press 1 to talk to our barely disguised thief. Instead, I heard a man clear his throat and say my full name like it was written in a report. Mrs. Sophie Hart? Yes. This is Special Investigator Daniel Graves with the National Transportation Safety Board, working with the FAA. I'm afraid I have some difficult news about your son. About Mr. Andrew Hart. The world narrowed down to that tiny phone speaker. My first thought, car crash. Andrew drove too fast. He always had. Then, heart attack, stress. It's the business. It wasn't. Your son's chartered jet went down this morning en route to Denver, Graves said, voice low. It appears to have been a catastrophic failure. There were no survivors. No survivors. 2 words that sound like a headline until they sit down on your chest like a boulder. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember walking inside. I remember a sound, some awful animal howl, and realizing it was coming from me. I dropped right there on the kitchen floor among the tile grout and the grocery list and yesterday's mail. My roses stared at me through the window, perfectly oblivious. Andrew Hart, founder and CEO of Skylion Systems, genius of autonomous drone swarms, the man who could negotiate a 6-figure deal while ordering drive-through tacos, gone in a blink, in a sky he thought he owned. My golden boy and his machines. Andrew had been obsessed with the sky since he was 5. While other kids were into dinosaurs or trucks, my boy would lie on the hood of my old Buick, watching planes carve white wounds through the blue. Look, Mom, he'd say, pointing. That one's late. You can tell. How can you tell? I'd ask. Because the trick with brilliant children is you let them teach you things. Makes them believe the world will listen. It's too low, he'd say in that serious little voice. They're trying to make up time. He built his first drone out of a broken RC car, some hobby store propellers, and an alarming number of my kitchen knives. At 16, he crashed an experimental quadcopter into the mayor's elm tree and sweet-talked his way out of a lawsuit by offering to inspect the man's gutters for hail damage. With the same drone, I raised him alone after his father left, and we were, in the classic American tradition, poor as sin and proud as hell. I worked as a receptionist in a dental clinic by day and in a hotel at night, and I learned to sleep sitting up in plastic chairs, my legs buzzing and my mind counting tips. He learned everything else. By his 30s, he had a warehouse, a team, and a company, Skylion Systems. They started with agricultural surveys drones that could scan crops for disease and then moved into security and logistics. There was talk of government contracts, defense even. My boy had his name on patents and his face on tech magazines. He called me twice a week, no matter what time zone he was in. "Mom, you should see this hanger," he'd say. "Looks like a sci-fi movie. Bring your mother a t-shirt." I'd answer, "I want proof I didn't hallucinate the last 30 years. He never married." "Too busy," he'd say, or, "I'm bad husband material, Mom. My first love is lithium-ion." I'd tease him that he'd die surrounded by drones instead of grandchildren. He'd laugh and say, "Not everyone needs grandkids, Soph. You've got roses and me." Turns out I had roses and a life insurance policy. The funeral and the note. The funeral was standing room only, because everyone loves a success story, especially a dead one. Detectives and engineers, venture capitalists in slim gray suits, former girlfriends, high school buddies who suddenly remembered best friend stories. All of Austin's tech adjacent came to cry politely and check who sat in which row. They'd wanted a big cathedral, some place with vaulted ceilings and stained glass. I said no. Andrew grew up in our small oak pew church. He sang off-key Christmas carols there, faked stomachaches to skip Sunday school. So that was where we put his sleek, expensive casket on a cheap wooden stand. I wore black, of course. Not just because it was a funeral, but because black makes people forget you're there. They look at the casket, the pastor, each other. They don't look at the mother whose whole world just fell out of the sky. People filed past me before the service, offering damp-palmed condolences. He was a visionary. So tragic. If there's anything I can do. They all said the same lines like they'd rehearsed in the parking lot. I sat in the front pew, hands folded, nails digging crescent moons into my palms to keep myself from screaming. On the far side of the aisle, the Skylion board members sat in a stiff row, the vultures in their natural habitat. Then, halfway through the second hymn, someone slipped into the pew beside me. I caught sandalwood cologne and the rustle of an expensive suit. When I glanced over, it was Andrew's attorney, Mr. Carlyle, silver hair, watch like a car. "My condolences, Mrs. Hart," he murmured. "Thank you." He slid something onto my lap without looking at me. A folded piece of stationery. "The will reading is scheduled for tomorrow morning," he whispered. "Skylion headquarters, 9 sharp. There are developments we'll have to discuss. You may want to see this first." And just like that, he vanished back to the second row, leaving the note on my black dress. I opened it, expecting some legal schedule, a list of documents. Instead, I read, "You think everything will belong to you. Turn around. Your grandchildren are behind you and they will take everything from you." Those 2 sentences turned my spine to ice. We were at Andrew's funeral. My son didn't have grandchildren. He didn't even have a wife. I turned. They were watching me. The twins. They looked like they belonged in an ad for expensive soda, tall, athletic, dressed in black that somehow still looked casual. The girl's hair was long, ink dark, twisted into a sleek ponytail. The boy's was buzzed on the sides, slicked back on top. They had matching silver pendants that glinted at their throats. The girl gave me the tiniest nod, like we were sharing a joke. I turned back around before I did something unladylike, like climb over the pew and grab her by the hair. The rest of the service passed in a fog. People spoke, sang, cried. I sat there with that note burning in my hand like a coal. Grandchildren. There was only one woman that idea could possibly tie to, and she'd been out of my life for exactly 25 years. The housekeeper who left in the night. Her name was Carla Ruiz, and she'd been my housekeeper when Andrew was 22 and Skylion was still a messy dream in my garage. Back then, I was working double shifts, my back was shot, and the house looked like a tornado had moved in and decided to raise a family. Carla had come recommended from a friend at church, late 30s, serious, tidy, good with laundry. She was quiet, efficient, and had a way of humming old Spanish songs while she scrubbed. Andrew hardly noticed her. He was always at the warehouse or hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table, surrounded by circuit boards and takeout boxes. At least, I thought, he hardly noticed her. One night late, I came home and found them laughing over coffee. Carla's dark hair was loose around her shoulders. Andrew's smile was the stupid boyish one I hadn't seen in years. He introduced us like they were peers, not employer and housekeeper. Mom, Carla knows someone in logistics at Deltex. She's going to get me a meeting. She did. That meeting turned into Skylian's first real contract. A month later, Carla quit. She called that night, voice tight. Siora Hart, I'm so sorry, but I can't come in anymore. I'm moving to San Antonio. It's family emergency. I offered more money. She refused. The next day, she left my key under the mat and was gone. No forwarding address. No goodbye. Andrew shrugged it off. People move, Mom, he'd said. It's not a conspiracy. I let it go. I was tired, and Skylian was suddenly taking off, and Carla was just the woman who'd once saved my son from ruining a load of whites in the wash. Now, 25 years later, at my son's funeral, someone claimed she'd given him grandchildren. Grandchildren who wanted everything. The will. Skylian headquarters smelled like money and printer toner. They'd turned an old airplane parts warehouse into a glass-walled temple of innovation, or so the brochure on the lobby coffee table claimed. When I walked in the next morning in my navy skirt suit bought for weddings and buried husbands, the receptionist jumped up like she'd seen a ghost. Mrs. Hart, I'm so sorry, she said. Mr. Carlyle and the board are waiting upstairs. The boardroom was a klitsch. Long glass table, chrome chairs, a view of the flight range out back where drones used to dance their careful patterns like a metallic flock of geese. Today, the sky was empty. At the head of the table sat Mr. Carlyle, flanked by the board members. At the far end, slouched in matching chairs, were the twins from the funeral. Up close, they were more unsettling. The girl spoke first. Hi, Grandma. I flinched. Don't call me that. She smiled, slow and sharp. Sure, for now. Mr. Carlyle cleared his throat. Mrs. Hart, may I introduce Taryn and Blake Ruiz? Ruiz, I repeated. Carla's last name. The boy, Blake, tilted his head. Our mother, yes. She passed away last year. Ovarian cancer. I felt a pang despite myself. Carla, humming in my kitchen. Carla, who'd helped my son land his first contract. Carla, who'd vanished. I'm sorry, I said stiffly. Thank you, Taryn said, voice flat. Let's get to the part where our father left us half his empire. My son's company was 5 years away from folding flat when he was 12 and thought an empire was a Marvel villain. Mr. Carlyle looked pained. As I explained on the phone, Mrs. Hart, Mr. Hart updated his will 8 months ago. He acknowledged. He glanced at the twins, his biological children, and directed that his estate be split equally between you and them. The room went quiet enough to hear my blood roaring. Excuse me, I said. Andrew and I had argued about a lot over the years. Girlfriends, risk tolerance, whether he was remembering to eat vegetables. He had never ever mentioned children. He did what? I have the documents here, Carlyle said, sliding a thick folder across the table toward me. A notarized acknowledgement of paternity, and a series of amendments to his will. He also arranged for a DNA test through a private lab to confirm parentage. Private lab, I repeated. Not say, a hospital? Carlyle hesitated. He wanted confidentiality. I opened the folder. The acknowledgement letter was in Andrew's handwriting, earnest and oddly formal. I, Andrew Michael Hart, hereby acknowledge that Taryn and Blake Ruiz, born July 10, 2000, are my biological children with Carla Ruiz. I regret my absence from their lives to date and intend to amend that as much as possible. My son, my boy who told me everything from failed math tests to broken prototypes. He'd written these words and never said a thing. He planned to tell you, Carlyle added, like a man throwing a Dixie cup of water on a house fire. He'd only reconnected with them recently, after their mother reached out from hospice. It was delicate, my ass. So, Blake said, leaning back like this was a negotiation in a bar. As we understand it, the estate consists of the family home, valued at about $2 million in this insane market. Skylion Systems, current valuation at roughly $5 million. Your liquid assets, and your son's life insurance policy. His casual, practiced tone told me he'd rehearsed those numbers. I blinked at him. You rehearsed that in the mirror, didn't you? He grinned. Maybe. You little Mrs. Hart, Carlyle cut in. Andrew's instructions were clear. The estate splits equally 50% to you, 50% divided between the twins as a unit. That means they collectively own 25% each. And the house? I asked. Carlisle's jaw tightened. The house is titled in Andrew's name. It passes under the same terms. Taryn tapped her nails on the table. So we own half of it, effective immediately. I felt my heart slam once, hard. My roses, my kitchen, my worn-in couch, and the dent in the hallway where Andrew had crashed a skateboard. Half of it theirs, by law. I looked at them. They looked at me. Then Taryn smiled, sweet as battery acid. Don't worry, she said. We're very hands-on. When the wolves move in, they moved in 3 days later. I came home from a morning walk to find a U-Haul truck parked crooked in my driveway, blocking my rose beds. Loud music thumped from the open door. A tattooed moving guy was hauling boxes in through my front door like he owned the place. I stood there on the sidewalk, in my visor and walking shoes, clutching my grocery tote, and felt 67 slam into me like a diagnosis. What do you think you're doing? I demanded. Blake popped his head out of the door, grinning. Hey, Soph, Mrs. Hart, I corrected automatically. Legally, we're tenants in common, Taryn said, appearing behind him with a box labeled shoes in thick black marker. So we're exercising our right to occupy our portion of the property. Didn't Carlisle explain? He said you have ownership, I said. Not that you were moving into my guest rooms like cockroaches after a flood. Blake winced theatrically. Harsh. Taryn tilted her head. We thought you'd be glad. Family under one roof and all. You always wanted grandkids, right? They're not grandkids if they show up with a moving truck and a spreadsheet, but the thing is, they weren't stupid. They'd done their homework. Legally, they owned half the property. If I tried to throw them out, I'd end up in court, and the last thing I needed was some judge deciding I was too old and emotionally compromised to manage the estate. So they moved in, and then the real war started. The first thing they did was throw a party. I'd just gotten used to the sound of their luggage rolling through the halls when Friday night hit. I was in my bedroom reading a contract from Skylion. The board had already started circling like sharks, and I'd decided I needed to learn what a memorandum of understanding actually meant when the bass started downstairs. The walls shook. My bedside lamp rattled. I opened my door to find the hallway pulsing with colored light. Taryn had installed LED strips along the baseboards. They flashed blue, then red, then a nauseating green. I marched downstairs. The living room was unrecognizable. My grandmother's antique coffee table had been shoved against the wall. A DJ, an actual DJ, with a console and headphones, had set up near the sliding glass doors to the patio. Strangers milled everywhere, red cups in hand, perfume and sweat thick in the air. Excuse me, I said loudly, but no one heard over the music. I pushed through the bodies until I saw Blake near the kitchen, laughing with a tall girl in a sequin dress. Turn it down, I yelled, grabbing his arm. He blinked at me. Whoa, Soph, you good? This is my house, our house, Taryn corrected from the breakfast nook, where she was perched on my dining table, boots grinding crumbs into the wood. 50%, remember? Someone bumped into me, sloshing beer down my sleeve. Out, I snapped. Party's over. Everyone out now, or I'm calling the police. A boy with a nose ring laughed in my face. Lady, we are the police. He wasn't. He was just a jerk in a bomber jacket, but the crowd laughed with him. Blake raised his hands. Okay, everybody chill. Grandma's, he stopped himself. Sophie's old. She needs quiet time. That's not better, I informed him. You knew we were having people over, Taryn said. We texted you. She had. 10 minutes before the party started, while my phone was charging in the other room. I felt my blood pressure spike. You broke my coffee table. You're grinding food into my relax. Taryn hopped down and grabbed a slice of pizza from the box on the floor. We'll Venmo you for any damage. You can keep the receipt for your records. Venmo? I don't want your Venmo. I want my house back. You want it quiet? Blake said. Go upstairs. We'll keep it down after midnight. They didn't. By 2 a.m., my head was pounding. The house reeked of weed and cheap beer, and someone had thrown up in the hydrangeas. The next morning, I came downstairs to find my favorite aquarium, a 40-gallon tank I'd kept since Andrew was 10, on the floor in glittering ruins. The stand had been shoved aside for more dance space. At some point, the glass had cracked and given way. My angelfish lay pale and still among the shards. I stared at them for a long time. Blake came in, squinting against the light. Hair a mess. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. We'll, replace it. I didn't answer. I just got the dustpan and garbage bags and started cleaning up my dead fish while my so-called grandchildren stepped around me to get to the fridge. They emptied it, of course. Milk, eggs, leftovers. I went to make myself a sandwich and found only condiments and a half-eaten lemon. They laughed when I pointed it out. You can afford more, Taryn said. We saw the numbers. The numbers. As if my grocery budget were a line item on some spreadsheet called Old Lady's Assets. When I roasted a chicken 2 days later, a small act of defiance and comfort, they came home with takeout and turned their noses up. Grease, Taryn said, wrinkling her perfect nose. So bad for you at your age. At my age. I was going to carve that phrase onto both their tombstones. They waited till I went to the bathroom, then dumped the entire bird into the trash, along with the pie I'd baked. We're doing intermittent fasting, Blake explained when I came back and saw the empty dishes. You shouldn't tempt us like that. I stared at the clean plates, the open trash, the bones already buried under pizza boxes. You're monsters, I said quietly. He laughed like I'd complimented him. The tea. The worst part wasn't the noise, or the broken things, or even the way they treated my food like it was somehow offensive. It was the way they treated me. They made fun of my reading glasses, my comfortable shoes, my habit of falling asleep in front of the news. They joked about my dentures, never mind that I only wore a partial plate. One night, I came down to find they'd stuck them in a bowl of green jello. Look, Soph, Blake said, holding up his phone to record my reaction. It's like they're in cryogenic suspension. Their friends cackled. I snatched them back, teeth chattering half with fury, half with the thought of where that jello had been. You will not film me in my own house, I said. Content, Grandma, Taryn said. You should be grateful. We're making you relevant. That was when I started keeping my bedroom door locked. Then came the tea. It started small, little waves of dizziness in the late afternoon. I'd be sitting in the garden pruning roses and suddenly the world would tilt, like the house had jumped to one side. I chalked it up to stress, to grief, to age, the convenient enemy. Then, one Tuesday, I woke up in my own bed fully dressed, shoes on, with no idea how I'd gotten there. The last thing I remembered was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea Taryn had offered me because you look tense. I'd taken 3 sips. The next thing, it was midnight, my lamp was on, and my phone showed I'd missed 6 calls from Mr. Carlyle about an urgent board meeting. Downstairs, I found an empty beer bottle on the counter beside my tea mug. Rough night? Blake asked the next morning, smirking over his protein shake. I don't drink, I said slowly. Yeah, looked like the tequila hit you hard, he said. You were singing Bon Jovi at the top of the stairs. Pretty epic. I don't remember that. Age, he said lightly. Happens. I stared at the mug. I may be 67, but I am not stupid. I spent my life reading faces, moods, subtext. When you're a single mother working in customer service, you learn to see danger under smiles. I took the mug to the sink, rinsed it, and next time they offered me tea, I smiled and said, no, thank you. I'm trying to hydrate. They didn't press, but the next week, I found a pill under the edge of the living room rug, small and white, half crushed. I'd seen that shape before on commercials in pamphlets. I took a picture, then flushed it. Pharmacology is not my specialty, but I know this. When rich 20-somethings want their elderly relative declared incompetent, they start with concerned and end with chemically assisted. They wanted me confused, forgetful, out of the way. They wanted, in other words, to push me out of my own life like an obsolete operating system. That's when I gave away my roses. Goodbye, garden. His name is Marcus, and he's been my gardener for 10 years. 40-something. Kind eyes, a patience with plants my son always reserved for machines. He'd started as the guy who mows my lawn and somehow become the only person in this zip code I trust. He loved my roses like they were his. I'd catch him talking to them sometimes in Spanish when he thought I wasn't looking. The week after I found that pill, I asked him to stay for coffee after he finished trimming the hedges. He sat at my kitchen table, twisting his cap in his hands. The twins were out, thank God. I'd checked twice. Esray, heart, I am so sorry about your son, he said quietly. He was a good man, always said hello. Thank you, I said. He was. I took a deep breath. Marcus, I'm giving you the garden. He frowned, clearly thinking his English had failed him. You mean, the work? No, I slid a folder across the table. The land, the entire back lot. It's 2 acres. The title transfers in there. His eyes widened. No, I can't. You can and you will, I said. Before my newfound heirs decide they'd like to pave it over for a pool shaped like a dollar sign. He blinked. Heirs? So I told him. About the twins, the will, the parties, the aquarium, the tea. Marcus listened, jaw tightening, hands clenched on his cap. Carajo, he muttered when I finished. Perdón, Ciora. These kids, they are not good people. No, I agreed pleasantly. They're parasites with better clothes. He flipped through the documents, lips moving as he read. I'd had Mr. Carlyle draw up everything airtight. The land behind the house my sanctuary, my roses, my potting shed sectioned off, deeded to Marcus's newly formed business entity, Rio Verde Gardens LLC. Why? He asked softly. This is worth a lot of money. So are my nerves, I said. And my nerves need to know that when the dust settles, something I loved ends up with someone who will take care of it. He swallowed hard. They will not like this. I'm counting on it, I said, and smiled. Because here's the thing. You don't survive 67 years, a dead husband, a vanished housekeeper, a genius son, and your own arthritic knees without learning something about leverage. The house might be half theirs, but the back lot was still mine until I made it not. And once it was Marcus's legally, it was untouchable. I'm not giving up, I said, more to myself than to him. I'm reallocating resources. Marcus laughed weakly, wiped at his eyes. You talk like a businesswoman now, S-Ray. Heart. That's the plan, I said. The roses were my first career. Drones are my second. Learning to fly. The Skylion board expected a grieving, fragile old woman they could bundle off with a generous buyout and a pat on the head. What they got was me in a navy pantsuit I dug out of a closet and shoes with orthopedic inserts and absolutely no intention of going quietly. Mrs. Hart, the chairman, a man named Patel, said in that syrupy tone people reserve for toddlers and the elderly. We understand this is a difficult time. If you'd prefer to appoint a professional trustee to manage your interests, no, thank you, I said, flipping open my notebook. I'll be managing my interests personally. Why don't you start by walking me through current contracts over $5 million and our cost structure for the next 2 quarters? He blinked. I smiled. Andrew's CFO, a thin woman in her 50s named Leela, hid a grin behind her hand. I am not, by nature, a numbers person. I got through high school algebra by sheer stubbornness and a very patient teacher, but I am excellent at faking it until the real thing catches up. I spent my days at Skylion, sitting in on meetings, asking stupid questions that weren't actually stupid, and my nights at home Googling every term I didn't understand until my eyes crossed. Mom, you don't have to do this, Andrew had told me once when I'd tried to read one of his early contracts. It's boring. Turns out, boring is code for this is where the power is. I learned what a term sheet was, how to read a balance sheet, why cash flow mattered more than top-line revenue. I learned which board members owned how much stock and who secretly hated whom. I learned that Leela, the CFO, had been quietly keeping Skylion alive through 3 near disasters while the men on the board preened on magazine covers. And I learned that my sweet grandchildren had already tried to stick their sticky fingers into the company pie. They requested access to executive compensation packages and IP assignment agreements the day after the will reading. Leela told me over coffee in her cramped office. Said they needed to understand their asset base. I told them to submit a formal request through counsel. I snorted. They're used to getting their way by being charming. Structure confuses them. Leela's mouth twitched. It won't confuse them for long. They're not dumb. I've noticed, I said dryly. She hesitated. Sophie, if this gets ugly, the board may pressure you to sell. They don't like uncertainty, and heirs fighting over control. That's messy. They'd rather cash out, fold into a bigger company, and call it a day. Can they force a sale? She shook her head. Not without you. Between your shares and your sons, you still hold controlling interest. For now. That was the phrase everyone kept using about me lately, like I was a limited time offer. I looked out the office window, where a prototype cargo drone stood on its launch pad, wings folded like a resting bird. My son built this, I said, from plastic and hope and debt. I won't let to strangers and a handful of scared old men tear it apart because they're terrified of turbulence. Leela raised her coffee cup in a toast. To turbulence then. If I throw up on your carpet, I warned her, I expect hazard pay. The first crack in the story. The thing about a lie is it never fits quite right. It's always pulling somewhere to tight here, to loose there. You just have to tug the right thread. For weeks, I'd been swallowing the fact of the twins like a bad pill. The DNA test, the acknowledgement, my son's handwriting saying, "I regret my absence from their lives." But late one night, sitting at my kitchen table with my reading glasses perched on my nose and Skylion files spread out around me like a paper fort, I pulled out the twins' birth certificate copies from the wool folder. Twins, Taryn and Blake Ruiz. Date of birth, July 10, 2000. Mother, Carla Ruiz. Father, blank. I stared at that blank line. My memories of 1999 and 2000 were sharp and spotty in weird ways. That was the year Andrew almost dropped out of college to go full-time with drones. The year my back went out and I spent 2 months on painkillers, watching daytime TV and wondering if life was supposed to hurt this much. It was also the year Carla left. She'd been working for us on and off for 3 years. She'd never missed a period of work for more than a day. She'd never seemed pregnant. I am a woman. I know what pregnancy looks like, even under baggy cleaning uniforms. Could she have hidden it? I suppose. But twins? Full-term twins? I remembered one afternoon, months before she left. I'd come home early and found her sitting at the kitchen table with a hand pressed to her stomach, face pale. "You all right?" I'd asked. "Just a little sick," she'd said. "Must be something I ate." She'd gone back to scrubbing the stove and I'd gone back to my life. I hadn't seen her again after the family emergency call. I pulled out my old paper calendar from that year. Yes, I keep them. Don't judge, and flipped to the months around July 2000. Carla's name appeared regularly until March. Then nothing. So she'd stopped working for us 3-4 months before the twins were born. That wasn't suspicious by itself. You can work while pregnant, God knows. But something about it rubbed me wrong. I looked at the DNA test report. It was from a private lab called Genetic, headquartered in Dallas. Fancy logo, lots of jargon. The conclusion was simple. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%. I googled the lab. Their website looked sleek, too sleek. Stock photos of smiling multi-ethnic families, a list of services, paternity, ancestry, health predisposition, a client portal link, and a footer that said, "A member of the Helio Ventures family of companies." Helio Ventures. I knew that name. It was on a term sheet in my Skylion folder, one of the venture firms that had approached Andrew last year for a funding round he'd ultimately turned down. Too pushy, he'd told me in one of our rare quiet dinners. They want the tech, not the vision. Helio Ventures, who'd wanted a piece of Skylion and gotten told no. Helio Ventures, who happened to own the lab that certified these two pests as my blood. That could be coincidence. Or it could be a lie that was finally starting to pull. My pool used to be my sanctuary. Andrew had installed it for me as a surprise when Skylion got its first $1 million contract. "For your back, Mom," he'd said, hugging me from behind while I cried at the sight of the sparkling blue rectangle in the yard. After the twins moved in, I avoided it. For one thing, there were always strangers lounging by it. For another, I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me in a swimsuit. Vanity survives grief, trust me. One Saturday afternoon, I came home from a board strategy session feeling wrung out and saw 3 cars parked crooked on my lawn. Laughter and music spilled from the backyard. I walked through the house gripping my bag like a weapon. Out back, a dozen people in various states of undress were gathered around the pool, red cups and beer bottles everywhere. Someone had tossed fast food bags into my rose bushes. A girl in a neon bikini was perched on the diving board, taking selfies. And in the pool itself floated something that made my jaw clench. Empty chip bags, plastic cups, a half-eaten burger. And to add insult to literal injury, a loogie glistened on the surface like a particularly disgusting lily pad. Out. My voice came out like a shot. The DJ, they always had a DJ, like they traveled in packs, turned the music down a notch. People looked at me then, seeing I was just the old woman again, looked back at their phones. I said out. I snapped. "Get out of my pool, out of my yard, and out of my sight before I turn a hose on you like feral cats." A few of them laughed. Most ignored me. Then Marcus stepped through the side gate. He froze when he saw the scene. He was supposed to be there to measure for a new irrigation system for his lot, the garden, now legally his. His gaze moved from the trash in the pool to my face. "Esray, heart," he said softly. "Do you want me to call someone?" Taryn materialized at his elbow, wearing a white bikini that would have gotten any of my generation grounded for a month. "Relax, Sophie," she said, sipping her drink. "We'll clean up, eventually." "No, I said, struggling to keep my voice level. You'll clean up now. And if I see one more piece of garbage in this pool, I will hire a pressure washing company and send you the bill, plus interest, plus a handling annoyance surcharge. Blake lounged in a deck chair, sunglasses on. You can't talk to us like that. I just did, I said, and I'll keep doing it until one of us dies. Statistically, yes, it'll probably be me, but I intend to make your decades without my money miserable enough that you'll wish you'd behaved when you had the chance. A few of their friends shifted uncomfortably. They weren't used to old ladies biting back. Taryn's jaw tightened, just a fraction. Fine, she said. Everyone out. Party's over. The queen has spoken. Damn right, I muttered. They trailed out, grumbling, grabbing their shoes and phones. Marcus waited till the yard was empty, then turned to me. You okay? No, I said, but I will be. He nodded. They don't respect anything. They respect money, I said, and power. And I'm about to remind them who has both. I looked at the pool, at the cloudy, dirty water. I'm having it drained, I said, and I'm putting in a cover with a lock. If they want to swim, they can go to a public pool like the rest of us peasants. Marcus grinned. I'll call a guy. Sometimes revenge is big. Sometimes it's petty. The trick is to enjoy both. The house had grown strange. Shadows in the hallways, strangers' voices drifting up at all hours, the smell of vape smoke and expensive cologne woven into the curtains. I moved through it like a ghost, silent, listening. One night, I was coming back from the kitchen with a glass of water when I heard my name from behind the closed door of the study, Andrew's old office, now colonized by Taryn as her workspace. I paused, the hair on my arms prickling. The door wasn't fully closed. A sliver of light spilled into the hallway. I edged closer. I don't care what the old bat says, Taryn was saying. Her voice had that strained, thin quality it got when she was trying to sound calm. We're entitled. The DNA's solid. The will's airtight. She can snarl all she wants. Blake snorted. She's not just snarling. She's learning. Leela says she's actually getting at contracts, valuations. If she starts playing hardball with the board, Helio's going to freak. Helio. I leaned in, heart thumping. She can't block a sale forever, Taryn said. She's 70, 67, Blake corrected. Same thing, Taryn snapped. Point is, the board wants out. We get them on our side. We can pressure her. For her own good. Yada yada. But Helio needs reassurance. They put money into setting this up. They want their return. My breath caught. Helio, the venture firm. The one that owned the lab. Relax, Blake said. We did our part. Carla did hers before she croaked. The lab signed off. Dad signed off. Gennady Kajar's report is unbreakable. Unbreakable. Yeah, well, maybe don't say that word, Taryn muttered. If anybody ever digs into how many private paternity cases that lab's run for Helio's associates. It's fine, Blake said. Nobody's going to dig. Who's going to believe some ancient grandma over a signed lab report and a handwritten confession? We've got the paper, the PR, and the sympathy. She's just a speed bump, ancient grandma. I stepped back, heart hammering, the words pressing into me like stones. Did our part. Carla did hers. Lab signed off. Helio needs their return. Nobody's going to dig. They'd underestimated me. People often do. I padded back to my room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from something sharper. For weeks, I'd been on the defensive, swatting away their petty cruelties, reacting to their moves. Now, finally, I had something else, a motive, a connection, a confession of sorts. They weren't my grandchildren. They were a business plan, and I have never hated anything more than being treated like a line item. I looked at my reflection in the dresser mirror, a 67-year-old woman with streaked gray hair, tired eyes, and a spine made of tempered steel. All right, Soph, I said to myself, you used to prune roses. Now you're going to prune a lie. I picked up my phone, scrolled to a number I hadn't dialed in years, and hit call. It rang twice. Then, a familiar voice answered, groggy but alert. Sophie, it's been a long time. Everything okay? Hi, James, I said to my old neighbor, the one who now worked as an investigator for an insurance company that hated fraud almost as much as I did. No, everything is not okay. I need you to help me prove that a DNA test worth $5 million is fake. There was a pause. Well, he said slowly, that sounds interesting. Oh honey, I said, leaning back as the first real smile in weeks pulled at my mouth. You have no idea. When a man tells you a DNA test is unbreakable, what he really means is, please, for the love of God, don't pull this thread. So naturally, I pulled. James showed up on my porch 2 days after my late-night call, looking exactly the same as he had 15 years earlier, just more creased. Hey, Soph, he said, holding out a bakery box. Brought colikies. Figured we shouldn't investigate on empty stomachs. James used to live 2 houses down when Andrew was little. Back then, he was a cop with restless feet and a sharp nose for lies. Now he did investigations for an insurance company that hated fraud like Texas hates high taxes. He stepped into my chaos boxes of Skylion files on the dining table, legal pads stacked under the salt shaker, my laptop open to 3 tabs on corporate governance for idiots. He whistled. Damn, you weren't kidding. I put on coffee and told him everything. The twins, the will, the DNA lab owned by the same venture firm that had salivated over Skylion, the overheard conversation. Helio needs reassurance. They put money into setting this up. Carla did her part. By the time I finished, the coffee was cold. James leaned back, Colossian touched, eyes narrowed. So let me get this straight. Your dead son's company is worth $5 million on paper, I said. More if the government contracts land. And suddenly out of nowhere, he has 2 heirs, conveniently in their 20s, conveniently photogenic, conveniently connected to a lab owned by a firm that wants that company. That's the gist. He blew out a breath. Jesus, they didn't even try to make it subtle. They tried to make it legal, I said. Different thing. He nodded slowly. Look, DNA fraud isn't easy. Labs have protocols, chains of custody, accreditations. But not easy isn't impossible. Especially if you own the place. So what do? First thing, he said, sliding his notebook closer, we get a second opinion. A real one. From a lab that doesn't belong to vultures in Patagonia vests. I frowned. Andrew's gone. How do we test paternity without him? Hair, toothbrush, old razor, anything that might still have his DNA. I thought about the box in my closet. The one I hadn't opened since the funeral. And for the kids, James went on, we'll need fresh samples. With ironclad chain of custody. They can't know what it's for. I raised an eyebrow. So we trick them. He smiled. It's not tricking, it's withholding context. Same thing, darling. Semantics, he said. My favorite game. After James left, I went into my bedroom, shut the door, and pulled the old showbox down from the top shelf of my closet. Andrew's things. I'd shoved them up there in the first week after the crash, when the sight of his handwriting could knock the air out of my lungs. The box smelled like dust and memory. Inside, a high school football photo, a ticket stub from our first Astros game, a ribbon from a science fair, and at the bottom, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag, his old electric razor. I'd found it under the sink a month after he moved out for good. Keep it, he'd said, in case I forget one when I sleep over. Saves me shaving with your cheap disposables. He never did forget one. The razor sat there for years, then went into the box, then onto the shelf. I turned it over in my hands. The head was still on. The little trapdoor where the stubble collects had never been emptied. My son, visionary of unmanned flight, had always been allergic to small chores. James' voice in my head. Hair, razor, anything. I opened the compartment. There it was. A small, dense clump of his beard trimmings, dark with a few early gray threads. My stomach flipped. Hi, baby, I whispered, before I could stop myself. I closed it carefully and sealed the whole thing in a new plastic bag. Then I added the hairbrush from my bathroom drawer, the one he'd used when he stayed over, still with a few strands tangled in the bristles. I labeled them in big letters. A heart source. It felt like packing up pieces of a ghost. Getting DNA from your enemies is surprisingly easy if you live with them. Getting it in a way that would stand up in court is less so. We need them to consent to giving a sample, James said. And we need a nurse to collect it. No, Grandma swabbed my cheek while I was sleeping stuff. A judge will laugh us out of the building. Maybe we make it about the company, I said. Some kind of health screening. Skylion's always talking about wellness programs. His eyes lit. That could work. You get the CFO to announce a voluntary executive wellness panel. You invite the twins as stakeholders. You don't say the word DNA. I grinned. You do remember who you're talking to, right? I raised a boy who could bypass our dial-up parental controls with a calculator. Deception is my love language. The next day, I took Leela to lunch and laid it out. Not the whole my grandchildren are grifters piece. Just enough. I'm worried about succession planning. I said. Thought it might be smart to have baseline health data on key stakeholders. You, me, a couple of board members, the twins. You know optics. We care about our people and all that. Leela sipped her iced tea, watching me with those clever eyes. You want a wellness panel? Yes. Full workup? Blood, genetics? The whole shebang? I widened my eyes. Is that typical? Depends how much you're willing to pay. She thought for a moment. I know a lab. Totally independent. Good people. I trust them. They sniff out fraud for our insurers. I could make a call. Please do, I said. Oh, and I want chain of custody so tight it squeaks. She smiled slowly. You're up to something, Sophie. I'm up to survival, I said. Helps to be healthy while I'm doing it. We scheduled the Skylion Executive Wellness Day for the following week. HR sent out cheerful emails about preventive care. The twins got their invites marked high importance. Taryn raised an eyebrow over her phone at breakfast. Mandatory? Strongly recommended, I said, stirring my oatmeal. And very expensive. It would be a shame if we wasted all that money and you two missed out. Blake, ever the one chasing status like it was oxygen, shrugged. Fine, might as well know how long we've got to spend your money. If he'd known how short that time actually was, he might have swallowed the joke. The wellness day was a circus of phlebotomists, nurses, and paperwork. They set up in one of Skylion's conference rooms. Leela supervised like a general at war. James hovered nearby, wearing a visitor badge and pretending to be an admin from the lab, quietly taking notes on who went where and which samples were sealed when. I rolled up my sleeve and let them take my blood, swab my cheek, put me on a scale that I politely threatened with violence. The twins came through 20 minutes later, dripping entitlement. What exactly are they testing? Taryn asked, eyeing the needles. Cholesterol, glucose, some genetic markers. The nurse said cheerfully. Nothing scary, just a snapshot of your health. Do we get to see the results? Blake asked, flexing his bicep in what I assume he thought was a subtle way. Of course, she said. They're your numbers. He relaxed. Narcissists love data about themselves. It makes them feel like the center of the universe and a lab experiment. When it was over, the samples went into locked, bar-coded containers. I watched every label, every seal, every handoff. That night, James and I sat at my kitchen table again, paperwork spread between us. They're on their way, he said as he hung up with the lab. We'll have preliminary results in 48 hours. Full report by the end of the week. Good, I said. I'd like to sleep again before I die. He studied me. How are you holding up really? I thought about the parties, the broken aquarium, the drug tea, the spit in my pool. I thought about Andrew's razor in its plastic bag. I'm mad, I said simply. I don't see that changing anytime soon. Stay mad, he said. Mad people get things done. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was in the Skylion boardroom pretending to understand a discussion about drone swarm optimization. I excused myself and answered in the hallway. Shoot, I said. James didn't waste time. We got the report. I'm sitting with the lab director right now. And he said, voice tight with suppressed triumph, if those two are your grandchildren, I'm a unicorn. My knees went weak. I leaned against the wall. Say it clearly, I said. For the record, independent lab, he said. Fully accredited. We ran paternity and kinship analysis, using your DNA in the samples attached to you as mother of Andrew Hart and the twins as alleged grandchildren. The probability that they're biologically related to you is effectively zero. Certainly not close enough to account for the 99.9998% in the Helio Labs report. So the first test is either grossly incompetent or deliberately falsified, he said. Given what you overheard, I'm voting door number 2. I closed my eyes. Relief and fury crashed into each other in my chest like waves. So they lied. Better than that, James said. We can prove it. It's one thing to know you're being played. It's another to have the receipts. James spent the next week doing what he does best, digging. Helio Ventures turned out to have its fingers in a lot of pies startups, labs, clinics. Geneticager, the firm that had done the original paternity test, was just one shiny badge on their Girl Scout sash of questionable ethics. We ran Helio through our internal database. James told me over lunch at a greasy spoon where nobody cared that we were spreading documents all over the vinyl booth. And guess what? This isn't their first rodeo. He slid a folder toward me. Inside were summaries of 3 cases, redacted names and all. Case 1. A 72-year-old widower with a controlling stake in a pharmaceutical startup suddenly discovers he has a 45-year-old son from a long-ago affair. Paternity confirmed by a private lab geneticager. Within months, the son joins the board, pushes for an aggressive sale to a helio-backed conglomerate. The old man dies of a stroke before the ink is dry. Case 2. A family-owned logistics company in Florida. Patriarch in his late 60s. Surprise heir. Paternity test. Share shuffle. Helio-led buyout. Case 3. A small biotech in Seattle. Same pattern, different accents. In all three, James said, tapping the pages, geneticager handled the paternity testing. In all three, the new heirs disappeared from public life after the sale. No social media, no further press. It's like they vanished with their payout. My skin crawled. So Helio's MO is basically find older founders, manufacture heirs, squeeze. Real heirs sometimes, he said, but sometimes, I'd bet my pension they made them out of thin air, or out of people who needed the money so badly they'd sign anything. Carla, I said. He nodded. I had one of our guys pull her medical records. Not easy, but she signed a release before she died for insurance purposes. Guess whose name shows up as financial assistance partner for some of her treatments? I didn't want to ask. I did anyway. Helio Charitable Health Initiative, he said. Paid for her scans, her chemo, her trials. Only it's not very charitable if the fine print says she's got to cooperate in any related legal or financial proceedings in exchange. So they found a dying woman, waived medical bills in front of her, and bought themselves a lie, I said, my voice flat. He hesitated. Sophie, there's one more thing. What? Carla did leave something. A note. To you. My heart lurched. To me? How? She gave it to her hospice nurse, along with a stack of in case of letters for various people. Most were mailed right after she died. Yours wasn't. The nurse said. She hesitated. She didn't know if it would help or hurt. And then, well, it got buried in a drawer. She saw the inquiry come through our system with your name and realized it might matter now. She gave it to me. He slid an envelope across the table. My name on the front in shaky but familiar handwriting. I stared at it for a long moment. You okay? James asked. No, I said, but I'm opening it anyway. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. Dear Sophie, if you are reading this, I am gone. I asked them to send it only if someone ever questioned things. Maybe no one will. Maybe you will never see this. But my nurse says it's better to write, for my soul. I lied. Those children are not Andrew's. I am so sorry. I had to stop then. The words blurred. I forced myself to keep going. I loved your son. I should not have. But I did. He was kind to me when others were not. We were foolish once. Only once. It was enough to make me hope. When I got pregnant, I was afraid. Then my ex came back. The twins are his. I left your house to hide the shame, to raise them without more gossip. Andrew never knew. He never touched me again after that night. Years passed. I got sick. The bills were so big, Sophie. You know how it is for women like me. Then these men from Helio came. They said my children had a right to a better life, that Andrew was rich now, that it was only justice. They had papers, tests, numbers. They said the science agreed. They offered to pay for my chemo if I just signed and stayed quiet. I wanted to say no, but the pain. You cannot imagine. And my children. They looked at me with hope. They are not evil, Sophie, just hungry. I did a terrible thing trying to save us. Please believe me. Your son did not abandon them. He did not know. If there is any judgment to come, it should be for me, not for him. Forgive me if you can. If you cannot, I understand. I do not forgive myself either. Carla. The paper shook in my hands. One spot was smudged with what might have been a tear, hers or mine. I folded it carefully, like it might break. Well, James said quietly, there it is. Yes, I murmured. There it is. My anger shifted, not away, just widened. It made room for something else, bone-deep sadness. For Andrew, for me, for a housekeeper who'd once hummed lullabies at my kitchen sink and then made a devil's bargain with her own death. The twins know, I said. They have to. You don't say Carla did her part if you think your mother's telling the truth. They chose this. Yeah, James said. They did. And now, I said, folding the letter again, I'm going to choose too. Helio might have had a pattern, but my charming house pests had a plan of their own. It started with subtle jabs. "Are you sure you took your meds, Sophie?" Taryn would ask loudly in front of friends. "You already asked that," Blake would chime in, glancing meaningfully at whoever was present. "You're repeating yourself. You okay?" I'd be in the middle of a sentence and they'd exchange looks over my head. "Her memory is getting worse," Taryn would stage whisper. "We're worried." Then the papers started showing up on the kitchen counter. Pamphlets about elder financial abuse, a brochure for a specialist in geriatric capacity evaluations, very subtle. The kicker came one evening when I found a neatly stacked folder on the dining room table. On top, a draft petition for guardianship over one Sophie Hart, citing increasing episodes of confusion, possible substance abuse, and inability to manage complex financial matters. Attached, printouts of grainy videos. One of me stumbling in the hallway after they'd drugged my tea. One of me waking up disoriented on the couch, mumbling as the TV blared. One of me in the backyard yelling at the pool party. To anyone who didn't live here, it looked bad. To anyone who did, it looked like a setup. I stood there, holding their little dossier, feeling a peculiar calm settle over me. They were going to try to have me declared incompetent. They were going to take my house, my company, my life, for my own good. And then, because there is such a thing as narrative timing, the front door opened. I heard their voices laughing about something on Blake's phone. I put the folder back exactly where I'd found it, sat down at the table, and folded my hands. They stopped in the doorway, surprised. "Oh," Taryn said, "you're up." "I am," I said. "I see my name is too." They glanced at each other. Blake tried for casual. "You weren't supposed to see that yet." "Oh, when was I supposed to see the paperwork for my legal kidnapping? Before or after the psych evaluation?" "Sophie," Taryn said, slipping into her most patient tone, "we're just concerned. You've been under a lot of stress. You've been forgetting things. You fell asleep in the middle of the day last week." "I was drugged," I said flatly. She blinked. "What? Do you want me to speak louder?" I asked. "I can enunciate. Old age hasn't hit my vocal cords yet." Blake laughed uneasily. "Come on, don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic," I said. "I'm being factual. You put something in my tea. I woke up hours later with no memory. You filmed me half-conscious and called it evidence. And then you left a pill under the rug. Next time you frame an old lady, hide the props better." Their eyes flickered. "A tell. You have no proof," Taryn said. "Oh, sweetheart," I said softly. "I'm building it." A beat of silence. I pushed my chair back and stood up. "You two have made a grave miscalculation," I went on. "You thought you were dealing with a lonely, grieving grandmother who'd cling to you because you're her last link to her son. But you're not my link to Andrew. Every hallway in this house is. Every drone in that warehouse is. You are intruders. And I am done playing roommate." Blake's jaw tightened. "What are you going to do, Soph? Hit us with your purse?" "Yes," I said. "And also with the law. And with something even scarier, paperwork." I walked past them, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Taryn demanded. "Lawyer," I said. "And you may want to call yours." "Why?" "Because," I said, opening the door, "in 48 hours, we're having a little family meeting at Sky Leon with the board and a representative from Helio Ventures. And I'd really hate for you to miss your own downfall." Mr. Carlyle nearly spilled his coffee when I told him what we'd found. "You're certain?" he asked, flipping through the lab reports, the chain of custody forms, Carla's letter. His hands trembled slightly. "As certain as science and a dying woman's conscience can be," I said. "The Helio lab says one thing. The independent lab says another. The patterns James found say this isn't a one-off. And my gut says those kids are about as related to me as my hydrangeas." He swallowed. "This is explosive." "Yes," I said. "That's the point. If this is true," he went on, "the will's amendments acknowledging them as heirs could be challenged. If Andrew signed based on fraud, we void their claims," I said. "To the house, to the estate, to Sky Leon, potentially," he cautioned. "Judges don't like to overturn wills, especially with time past. But with this kind of evidence, we'd have a strong case. Criminal charges are another matter entirely." "Helio and the twins conspired to defraud an estate worth millions," I said. "They tried to drug me and build a case to have me declared incompetent." "I'm no lawyer, but that sounds pretty criminal," he winced. "It does. But if this goes public, it will get messy. Skyleon's name will be dragged into it. The board already wants to sell," I said. "Here's their off-ramp. We give them a show, make sure they understand who the real villains are, and then we offer them something they've been too cowardly to ask for. And what's that? Carlisle asked cautiously. A controlled future, I said. On my terms, not Helio's. We set the meeting for Friday. Present, the full Skyly on board, Leela, me, the twins, a senior partner from Helio Ventures named Victor Hale, and James taking notes at the back. On Thursday night, I walked through my silent house, touching the back of chairs, the edge of the kitchen counter, the dent in the hallway where Andrew's skateboard had met drywall. The twins were out. No music, no laughter, just quiet. I stood by the dark aquarium stand empty since they'd smashed it and pictured my angelfish drifting in clean water again. Tomorrow, I told the empty room, we start fixing things. Boardrooms bring out the worst in people, or maybe they just strip away the polite lies. Everyone was already seated when I walked in. The board on one side, the twins and their shark on the other. Victor Hale looked like every venture capitalist I'd ever seen in magazines. Mid-40s, expensive suit, expensive watch, face that had forgotten how to smile without calculating ROI. Mrs. Hart, he said smoothly, rising just enough to count as courteous. I'm very sorry for your loss. Andrew was an impressive founder. Past tense already, I said. How efficient. He blinked. The twins sat a little behind him, like sleek guard dogs. Taryn in a tailored black blazer, Blake in a shirt open one button to far, trying to look grown. Patel, the board chair, cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. As you know, we're here to discuss both the future of Skylion and certain developments in the Hart estate. Yes, Victor said. As major stakeholders, we at Helio. You're not stakeholders, I interrupted. You're would-be buyers. His mouth tightened. We have a term sheet Andrew saw before his death. He saw it, I agreed. He didn't sign it. There's a difference. He turned to the board, ignoring me. Skylion needs capital to scale. Our proposal offers that and more. With the recent changes in ownership, I said. Yes, the recent changes. Let's talk about those, shall we? I laid a folder on the table and slid it to the center. In this folder, I said, you'll find 3 things. 1. The original paternity test from Gennady Kajer, a lab owned by Helio Ventures. 2. An independent paternity and kinship analysis from a separate accredited laboratory, using samples collected under strict chain of custody. 3. A letter from the twins' mother, Carla Ruiz, written before her death. A murmur rippled around the table. Victor's eyes flicked to the folder, then to me. I don't see how that's relevant to this meeting. I'm sure you don't, I said pleasantly. But humor me. I'm old. We do ramble. Patel opened the folder. The other board members crowded closer. Leela watched, expression neutral. Victor's jaw ticked once. According to the Helio lab, I went on, my son Andrew is the biological father of these 2. I gestured at the twins, who sat very still. According to the independent lab, there is something or other chance they're related to either me or Andrew. I'm not a scientist, but even I know that's what we in the business call contradiction. This is absurd, Taryn snapped. That lab must have made a mistake. 2 labs made a mistake? I asked. How clumsy of science. Victor smoothed his tie. Gennady Kajer is a reputable facility. If there's some discrepancy, we can look into it without we did look into it, James said from the back, standing up. Thoroughly. Victor bristled. And you are? James Porter, he said, private investigator, contracted by Mrs. Hart, and also representing the interests of an insurance group very interested in patterns of fraud. Patterns like this. He tapped the original DNA report. Watch yourself, Victor said coldly. No, I said. You watch us for a change. I nodded at James. He handed copies of his summaries to each board member. Past cases, red flags, the Helio charity that had paid for Carla's treatments. Patel's eyes widened as he scanned the pages. One of the other directors swore under his breath. I also spoke with Carla's hospice nurse, James said. She confirmed that Helio representatives visited Carla multiple times. They discussed her financial situation, her kids' future, and opportunities if she cooperated. Then there's this. He produced Carla's letter. That's private, Taryn blurted. Actually, Carlisle said from his seat near me, it's evidence, duly notarized by the nurse who held it, and it directly contradicts the paternity claim on which your entire inheritance rests. Blake's face had gone pale. You can't, this doesn't prove anything. She was sick. She could have been confused. She remembered quite a lot, I said quietly. Details about Andrew, about you, about the deal she was offered. Pain can make people desperate. It can also make them honest at the end. Victor leaned forward, voice cool. Even if there was some impropriety in the paternity testing, that doesn't change the will. Andrew legally acknowledged them as heirs. That acknowledgement stands unless a court decides otherwise. All you've done today is raise questions. Oh, I've done a bit more than that, I said. I pulled out my final card, my phone. Because, you see, Victor, the problem with courts is they're slow, and I'm impatient. So I thought, what would be faster than a judge? And I remembered. I smiled. The internet. His eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I pressed play on a recording and put the phone on the table. Taryn's voice filled the room, tinny but clear. I don't care what the old bat says. We're entitled. The DNA's solid. The will's airtight. She can snarl all she wants. Blake, she's not just snarling. She's learning. If she starts playing hardball with the board, Helio's going to freak. Taryn. Yeah. Well, maybe don't say that word. If anybody ever digs into how many private paternity cases that labs run for Helio's associates, Blake, it's fine. Nobody's going to dig. Who's going to believe some ancient grandma over a signed lab report and a handwritten confession? We've got the paper, the PR, and the sympathy. She's just a speed bump. The boardroom was dead silent when the recording ended. Well, I said into the quiet. Surprise, Grandma Doug. Taryn surged to her feet. You had no right to record us. In my own house? I asked. Under Texas one-party consent laws? I absolutely did, Pumpkin. Victor's composure had cracked. There was a sheen of sweat on his forehead now. This proves nothing, he said. Two disaffected young people blustering in private add it to the forensic reports, the conflicting DNA tests, Carla's letter, the past Helio cases, and the guardianship paperwork they drafted to have me declared incompetent, Carlisle said calmly, producing the twins' little folder. Taken together, it paints quite the picture. He turned to the board. Ladies and gentlemen, if this goes to court, it becomes a criminal investigation. We're talking potential charges of conspiracy to defraud, elder abuse, falsification of medical records. Skylian's name will be in every headline. So will Helio's and yours, I added to Victor. Personally, I did a little digging too. You signed off on the Helio charity payment to Carla. Your name's on those disbursements. A muscle jumped in his cheek. Now, I continued, folding my hands, I'm a reasonable woman. I don't want my son's company dragged through the mud because some hedge fund cowboys decided to play family drama with my life. I want Skylion to thrive. I want the board to stop quaking in their loafers. And I want these two, I jerked my chin at the twins, out of my house. What are you proposing? Patel asked hoarsely. Very simple, I said. First, Helio signs a statement acknowledging that their lab's paternity test is invalid and withdrawing any reliance on it. Second, the twins sign a renunciation of any and all claims to Andrew's estate, including the house and Skylion shares, citing newly discovered information and a desire to avoid prolonged litigation. Third, I agree not to pursue criminal charges as long as nobody so much as breathes in my direction again. And Skylion? Leela asked quietly. I keep controlling interest, I said. We take Helio's term sheet and set it on fire. Then we seek capital from someone who doesn't commit light family fraud as a side hustle, on our terms. Or we grow slow and stubborn and independent. Either way, we do it without selling our souls. Victor almost laughed. You think we're going to roll over because you've got a few documents and a shaky recording? I think you're going to ask yourself a question, I said. How badly do you want Skylion compared to how badly you want a federal investigation into your portfolio? Because I may be old, but I've got time, and an internet connection, and a very chatty investigator with insurance connections in 3 states. James gave a little 2-finger salute from the back. Helio's name gets tied to elder abuse and DNA fraud, I went on. Good luck raising your next fund. Meanwhile, Skylion will be just fine. People love a story about the plucky little company that escaped the claws of the big bad venture firm. We'll dine out on it for years. The board members were glancing at each other now, calculating. One of them, a man who'd barely spoken in months, finally leaned forward. I don't like being manipulated, he said to Victor, by anyone. The idea that you might have orchestrated fake heirs to strong-arm us into a sale. He shook his head. That's beyond the pale. Victor's jaw clenched. He knotted his hands together, then slowly unclenched them. This is extortion, he said. No, I said. Extortion is what you did to a dying woman. This is consequences. Taryn looked between us, panic finally seeping through the facade. We're not giving up our inheritance, she burst out. Our mother said your mother confessed, I said, holding up the letter. She admitted you are not Andrew's children. I know you think you're the protagonists here, but you're not. You're the supporting characters in a con that went too far. Blake's face hardened. We had nothing. We grew up with nothing. You have a house, a company, and that entitles you to drug me? I shot back. To move into my home and trash it? To spit in my pool and smash my aquarium and throw away my food? Poverty explains a lot. It doesn't excuse cruelty. He flinched. For the first time, I saw something that looked like shame, quickly buried. Victor exhaled, long and slow. All right, he said, hypothetically. If we agree to your terms, not hypothetically, I said. In writing, he ground out. If we agree, you won't go to the authorities? I won't go first, I said. But if anyone, anywhere, tries to use this to hurt Skyly on down the line, I will burn your fund to the ground with every interview, op-ed, and court filing I can manage, up to and including standing outside your office with a sign and a bullhorn. Silence. Patel cleared his throat. For what it's worth, from the board's perspective, this seems prudent. We avoid scandal. We retain our current leadership. We avoid a sale under duress. Leela's eyes met mine. Her lips twitched in the smallest of smiles. Victor looked at the twins. Step outside, he said to them. Now. They hesitated. Now. He repeated. They slid out, closing the door behind them. Victor straightened his tie. Send me the drafts, he said to Carlisle. We'll review and respond within 48 hours. You'll sign them, I corrected. He gave me a look full of knives. You're very sure of yourself for someone who nearly lost everything. I smiled. I'm very sure of myself because I nearly lost everything. There's a difference. In the end, it didn't take 48 hours. It took 36. Carlisle called me the next afternoon. They folded, he said, barely containing his glee. Helio's counsel sent back signed statements. The twins did too. They tried to add a clause demanding a modest settlement for emotional distress. I suggested they take their emotional distress and shove it. I laughed. A wild sound that startled even me. God, I love you today. We'll file the renunciations with the court, he went on. It'll take some time for the estate to be formally updated, but their claims are effectively gone. As for the house, they're tenants with no ownership now. You can give them notice. Don't worry, I said. I'll make it memorable. I waited until evening. They came home together, unusually quiet. No music, no laughter, just the dull thud of feet and tension. They found me in the living room, standing by the front door with 2 large garbage bags at my feet and a folder in my hand. What's this? Taryn asked, eyes wary. Your notice to vacate, I said, handing her the folder. 30 days, per the lease we never actually had. But I'm generous. You leave in 72 hours. You keep your pride. You drag it out. I drag in the sheriff. Blake snatched the papers from her, scanning. His face reddened. You can't kick us out of our own, it's not your house, I said. Not anymore. You signed away your claims. I saw the documents. That was under duress, Taryn said weakly. Oh, sweetie, I said, voice almost gentle. You don't know what duress feels like. Watching your son's casket lowered into the ground? That's duress. Giving away your garden so your parasites can't sell it for scrap? That's duress. You've been under mild discomfort. You'll live. You ruined our lives, Blake spat. No, I said. Your choices ruined your lives. I just refuse to let you ruin mine in the process. I nudged the garbage bags with my foot. They jingled faintly. What's in those? Taryn asked. Your trash, I said. Everything you left in the pool, the yard, the guest rooms. I spent the afternoon collecting your beer bottles and fast food wrappers. Consider it a parting gift. You can take them with you as a reminder of what you thought you were entitled to. She laughed bitterly. You are unbelievable. Thank you, I said. I work at it. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Taryn's face crumpled, just a fraction. We had nothing, she said again, softer this time. Helio came and said we had this father who'd abandoned us, this rich man who owed us. Mom, she wanted us to have a better life. She died thinking she'd given it to us. My anger wobbled, just a little. I read her letter, I said. She also died hating what she'd done. Taryn swallowed hard. You still could have walked away, I added. You could have taken a modest settlement. gone to college, started fresh. Instead, you moved into a grieving woman's house and tried to drug her into a guardianship. That's not poverty. That's choice. Blake looked away, jaw clenched. I don't forgive you, I said. Not now, maybe not ever, but I also don't plan to think about you every day for the rest of my life. You're not worth that kind of rent in my head. So here's how this is going to go. You pack, you leave, and you build something that's actually yours. Or you don't, and you circle the drain. Either way, you don't come back here. They didn't argue. 3 days later, they were gone. The house felt bigger, quieter, like someone had turned off a TV that had been blaring in the background for months. I walked through the empty guest rooms, touched the blank walls where their posters had been, and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since the funeral. Welcome back, I told the house. It hummed around me, old and familiar. The first thing I did after they left was call a cleaning crew. Not just any crew, Marcus's cousin, who ran a service that specialized in post-disaster restoration. Consider this a disaster, I told her, gesturing at the stains on the carpet and the mystery sticky on the banister. Emotional and physical, they scrubbed the place top to bottom. Carpets steamed, walls washed, curtains laundered until they smelled like lemon instead of vape. I had the pool drained, scrubbed, and covered with a heavy, locking lid. Then I put a small bistro table on top of it. Poetic, Marcus said when he saw it. Where once there was spit, now calf. Exactly, I said. I'm reclaiming my territory. I bought a new aquarium. Bigger this time. The guy at the fish store tried to talk me out of the fancy filtration system. At your age, he said, you might want something simpler to maintain. I stared at him over my reading glasses. At my age, I said, I can manage some tubes and a timer, dear. Just ring it up. He went scarlet and threw in an extra plant for free. The fish came home angels, tetras, one smug-looking pleco for algae control, and moved lazily through their bubbles. I watched them for an hour, breathing in sync with the filter's hush. At Sky Leon, things changed too. Victor slunk away, Helio licking its wounds. They sent a junior associate with a painfully rehearsed apology for any distress caused by misunderstandings. I accepted it with a smile sharp enough to cut paper and never returned their calls. The board, suddenly relieved of the looming sale, found its spine. We'd like to formalize your role, Mrs. Hart, Patel said in a meeting a month later. If you're willing. Formalize how? I asked. As chair, he said. You already hold majority control. It makes sense. I'm not a businesswoman, I protested automatically. Leela snorted. You're more of one than half the men I've worked for. You learned term sheets in a month and took down a predatory fund with a home printer and a cell phone. I had to admit, that did sound impressive when she put it like that. Fine, I said, but I want conditions. Patel's eyebrows went up. Such as? One, I said, counting on my fingers. We invest in employee ownership. Andrew believed in his people. I want that in writing. 2. We partner carefully. No one gets more than a minority stake without my fingerprint on the contract. 3. Leela gets the raise she's deserved for the last 5 years. Retroactive if we can swing it. Leela blinked. Sophie, don't argue with your chair, I said. The board actually laughed. We went through the numbers. The government contracts were moving forward cautiously. Skyleon had more work than it could handle, which is the only decent problem in business. I spent my days splitting time between the warehouse and the garden. I learned the difference between EBITDA and EBIT like a teenager cramming for finals, and then I went home and deadheaded roses for a man who now owned the land under them. You sure about this? Marcus asked one afternoon, surveying the back lot. His lot. The new sign read Rio Verde Gardens in looping script. He'd already put in a few raised beds for herbs. Positive, I said. I like knowing if a drone ever crashes back here. It's got to ask your permission first, he chuckled. I have one more condition though, I added. Oh, he asked. I still get to call them my roses. He smiled. Always, S-Ray. Heart. Always? Months passed. Grief doesn't leave. It just stops biting every time it passes by. There were still nights I woke up reaching for my phone, ready to send Andrew a text about a funny bird I'd seen hovering over the highway, only to remember the sky that had taken him. I kept his razor in the box, now with a note attached. Thanks for the assist, kid. Mom. Skyleon grew, slowly and sanely. We landed one of the government contracts, border surveillance, which made my stomach knot, but we negotiated strict usage language and transparency. I learned to ask questions like, How will this be used? And who controls the data? And what happens if someone like Helio comes sniffing around again? I started mentoring a few of the younger women in the company: engineers, project managers, a brilliant coder named Amrita who'd almost quit after some jackass on the board called her kiddo. They underestimate you until you're useful, I told her. Then they overestimate their right to your time. She laughed. Is that a famous quote? It will be, I said. Put my name under it. At home, the quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt chosen. I swam not in the pool, which I now used as a platform for container gardens, but in a heated indoor pool at the community center with a group of women my age who gossip better than the internet. When they complained about their kids, I told them mine had built a flying robot empire and left me to fight off fake grandchildren. At least you weren't bored, one said, eyes wide. Boredom is underrated, I replied. Every now and then, I thought about the twins, where they were, what they were doing, whether they were still measuring their worth in stolen square footage and borrowed money. I told myself I didn't care. Mostly I believed it. About 9 months after they left, a letter came. Not registered, not official, just a plain white envelope in my mailbox, sandwiched between a Bed Bath & Beyond coupon and a water bill. The handwriting on the front made my chest tighten. Taryn Ruiz. I stood in the driveway for a moment, the sun warm on my neck, the world very ordinary around me. Then I went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened it. Soft Mrs. Hart, I don't know how to start this. Good, I thought. Neither do I. We're in Houston. Blake is working nights at a warehouse. I'm doing freelance design gigs and some part-time social media for a restaurant. It's not glamorous, in case you're wondering. The apartment is small and the ceiling leaks when it rains, but it's ours, paid for with money we actually earned. I snorted despite myself. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I know that door is closed. I just can't stop thinking about what you said, about choices. Growing up, Mom told us this story about a man who didn't want us, who left her and us behind. When Helio showed up, it felt like justice, like we were finally taking back what was owed. We didn't question it because the alternative that our mother was wrong, or lying, or used hurt more than the idea that you might be collateral damage. That's not an excuse. It's just the only way I know how to explain how we let ourselves become people I don't like very much. When you played that recording in the boardroom, I wanted to sink through the floor, hearing my own voice talk about you like you were an obstacle. It was like meeting a stranger wearing my face. Good, I thought again, and then felt guilty for thinking it. I read Mom's letter too, the one she wrote you. I cried for a week, for her, for us, for Andrew, for you. I didn't know you could miss someone you never really had. I swallowed hard. We're in therapy now. Yeah, I know, Klitsch. But the woman we're seeing doesn't let us get away with anything. She says hurt people is true, but also that hurt people still have laws to follow. You're probably rolling your eyes at that. I was not, anyway. I wanted you to know we're not planning any more miracles. No more surprise heirs. No more games. We're just people, trying to pay rent and not be monsters. You don't owe us forgiveness. You don't owe us a reply. I just needed you to know that, in case part of why you can't sleep some nights is thinking we got away with it. We didn't. We live with what we did, every day. Taryn. I folded the letter and stared at the table. The old me, the one from before the crash, before the note at the funeral, would have grabbed a pen and poured out something messy and maternal. That me always wanted to fix, to soothe, to be liked. The new me sat there and let the complicated feelings roll. Anger, sadness, a flicker of pride that they were at least honest now. Then I got up, made myself a cup of tea which I poured myself, thank you very much, and thought about what I wanted. Not what I should do, what I wanted. I didn't want them back in my life. Not really. The house was peaceful. My days were full. My heart had only so much bandwidth left, and most of it was reserved for a boy who built drones and called his mother from airports. But I also didn't want to be the villain in their story forever. I didn't want them to use me as an excuse not to change. So I wrote back, Dear Taryn, thank you for your letter. I'm glad you and Blake are working and paying your own rent. You'd be amazed how many people your age still think of their parents' couch as a permanent mailing address. You're right. Hurt people is not a legal defense, but it is a good starting point for understanding why we do stupid, cruel things. The trick is to not build a personality around those things. I don't forgive you. That may come someday. It may not. Forgiveness is complicated. People treat it like a light switch when it's really more like pruning snip by snip, over time, deciding what gets to keep growing. What I can tell you is this. I don't think about you every day. You're not keeping me up at night. I hope that's oddly comforting. You did not ruin me. You shook my life like a snow globe, and I had to watch where everything landed, but the scene reassembled. That's what matters to me. I'm pleased you're in therapy. Listen to your therapist. Try not to charm your way out of the hard parts. You have that in you. I've seen it. Build something that's actually yours. A career, a friendship, a plant on the windowsill you remember to water. If in 10 years, you want to tell me about those things, you can write again. I won't promise to answer. I won't promise not to either. That's something you'll have to live with. Take care of yourself, both of you. Sophie Hart, not Grandma. I mailed it the next day. Then I went out back, checked on my roses, and texted Leela a meme about venture capitalists that made her nearly spit her coffee out in a meeting. Life, as they say, went on. Every once in a while, I catch a whiff of their cologne in a store and my neck prickles. Every once in a while, a drone takes off from the Skylion test range and for a second, I see Andrew standing there, grinning, pushing the world a little higher. But mostly, my days are quieter now. Intentional. Mine. People ask me, sometimes usually women my age, at the pool or the supermarket or church how I managed it all. How did you not just give up? One asked, eyes large over her cart of discounted cereal. I told her the truth. I thought about it, I said, for about 5 minutes. Then I realized nobody was coming to save me. The vultures don't stop circling just because you're tired. She nodded, eyes bright and wet. I'm so scared of being a burden, she whispered. Of my kids deciding I'm excess. Then don't be, I said. Not to them. Not to yourself. Get your paperwork in order. Learn where your money is. Ask stupid questions until they aren't stupid anymore. And if anyone calls you ancient, smile and remind them you've survived more Mondays than they've had hot dinners. She laughed a little. The thing is, we're taught as girls to be nice, to be accommodating, to share, even when the other kid already has a mouthful and both hands grabbing for more. Nobody tells you that at some point, you're allowed to say, no, this piece is mine. Not because you're selfish, because you've lived long enough to earn the right to exist for yourself. So here's my lesson, for whatever it's worth, from a 67-year-old woman who fought off fake grandchildren and venture capitalists in the same year. Don't wait until someone writes you a note at your son's funeral to realize you're the main character in your own life. Get angry sooner. Get educated faster. Give your roses away before they can be used against you. And when the wolves move in, don't just build higher fences. Teach them they picked the wrong grandmother. The other day, I stood in my garden, Marcus's garden, watching a Skylion drone fly overhead, quiet and precise. It hovered for a moment, then zipped off toward the test range. Show off, I muttered, wiping my hands on my jeans. My phone buzzed. A text from Leela. Contract signed. We did it. A new partner. Ethical, boring in the best way. Solid on the numbers. On our terms. I smiled. Thumbs flying. Told you. Turbulence is just air deciding who's serious. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, took a deep breath of rose-scented air, and went back to pruning. There was work to do. There always is. But this time, it was mine.